In some countries, a dirty floor is a national embarrassment. A stained shirt can end trust. An unwashed hand can erase dignity. Yet death is spoken of in whispers, accepted as fate, even honored. So why does dirt trigger more fear than dying itself? This is not a story about hygiene. It is a story about power, control, and the quiet terror of disorder. Because dirt is not just something we remove. It is something that reminds us how fragile our systems truly are. Tonight, we ask a question most societies avoid. Why do some nations fear dirt more than death? Chapter 1. The question no one dares to ask. There is a strange paradox hidden in plain sight, so ordinary that most people never stop to notice it. In some nations, a dirty shoe can quietly end a career. Not with anger, not with protest, but with silence. An unwashed hand can end a marriage. A neglected room can end trust. A single speck of dust can erase a reputation built over decades. No court summons, no public trial, just quiet exclusion. Yet death is negotiated with. It is spoken of with ceremony, wrapped in rituals, explained as destiny, fate, or divine timing. Even postponed in the mind, as though distance could soften its certainty. Why? Why do entire civilizations recoil at dirt, decay, and disorder with more horror than they do at mortality itself? Why does something so small, so mundane, provoke such disproportionate dread? This is not a story about hygiene. It is not about soap, clean water, or public health campaigns. Those are only the surface explanations, the respectable answers. Beneath them lies something far more uncomfortable. Fear. Not the fear of disease, not the fear of infection, but the fear of what dirt symbolizes. Because dirt is not simply filth. It is disruption. It is matter refusing to stay in its assigned place. It is proof that order is fragile, that discipline is temporary, that control, so carefully constructed, can unravel without warning. Death, by contrast, obeys structure. It comes once. It follows a sequence. It allows meaning to be assigned after the fact. Dirt offers no such comfort. It returns daily. It spreads quietly. It defies perfection. And for societies built on precision, hierarchy, and image, that defiance is intolerable. Human beings fear many things: pain, loss, extinction. But organized societies fear one thing above all else: the loss of control. Because control is not just power, it is identity. And tonight, we begin uncovering why some nations would rather stare into the face of death than confront the quiet, persistent reminder that order itself is an illusion. Chapter 2. Dirt as a philosophical enemy. To understand this fear, we must redefine dirt. Dirt is not merely soil clinging to skin or mud beneath fingernails. Dirt is matter out of place, a violation of expectation, a stain where purity was promised, a fracture in the illusion that the world is controllable. Anthropologists notice something unsettling. In societies obsessed with cleanliness, dirt is rarely neutral. It is moralized. A dirty body is read as a careless mind. A messy home becomes a reflection of a broken soul. Disorder is not just untidy, it is suspicious. In these cultures, cleanliness is not a habit learned in childhood. It is a virtue drilled into identity, a silent social language that whispers, "I am disciplined. I respect the system. I belong." To be clean is to signal obedience to structure, to rules, to hierarchy, to the invisible contracts holding society together. Dirt disrupts this language. It arrives uninvited. It refuses permission. It ignores status, wealth, and intention. A spotless floor can be ruined in seconds. A perfect garment stained by a single touch. Months of order undone by one careless moment. And in that moment, dirt speaks. It whispers of negligence, of failure to maintain control, of decay quietly advancing beneath polished surfaces. Death, by contrast, is strangely polite. It announces itself. It follows rituals. It obeys ceremonies and timelines. It arrives once, and then it is gone. Societies learn how to process death. They rehearse it. They give it language, symbols, prayers, and closure. Dirt offers no such mercy. It returns daily. It demands vigilance without rest. It is never finished. This is why cultures built on structure, on precision, order, and predictability come to fear dirt as an existential threat. Because dirt is proof that control is temporary, that perfection leaks, That entropy is always winning. And beneath all the scrubbing, washing, and sanitizing, there is a deeper terror. If dirt is allowed to remain, if disorder is tolerated, then the meanings we built, status, virtue, superiority, begin to erode. Dirt does not attack the body first. It attacks meaning. And a society can survive death. But it cannot survive the collapse of what it believes makes life ordered. Chapter 3. History's obsession with purity. History leaves fingerprints everywhere, and many of them are scrubbed clean. Ancient civilizations did not pursue cleanliness merely to escape disease. They pursued it to protect status. In imperial courts and sacred cities, cleanliness became performance. White garments, polished stone, ritual baths, not because they guaranteed health, but because they signaled power. To be clean was to be elevated above labor, above soil, above necessity. Those who ruled did not touch dirt. Others touched it for them. Cleanliness drew borders. Between ruler and subject. Between priest and peasant. Between the sacred and the profane. What was clean was declared chosen. What was dirty became dangerous. Over generations, this separation hardened into belief. Clean cities were read as proof of divine favor. Orderly streets meant righteous leadership. Shining temples meant moral superiority. Dirty places, by contrast, were not simply neglected. They were condemned. Filth became evidence of sin. Decay was rebranded as failure of character. Then history accelerated. Industrialization tore open old cities and forced millions into new ones. Factories multiplied. Housing shrank. Poverty concentrated. Disease followed, not because people were dirty, but because they were trapped. Yet instead of confronting inequality, many societies found a simpler villain: dirt. Sanitation campaigns often spoke the language of health, but carried the logic of judgment. The poor were described as unclean, their neighborhoods as breeding grounds, their presence as contamination. Entire communities were reduced to a threat that needed managing, isolating, or erasing. Death, when it came, was mourned. It could be framed as tragedy, as fate, as misfortune. But dirt? Dirt was treated as shame. And shame does not end with burial. It stains memory. It clings to names, neighborhoods, bloodlines. Death closes a chapter. Shame writes footnotes that last generations. And so history reveals something unsettling. Our obsession with purity was never really about hygiene. It was about control. Who is allowed to be seen as clean? Who must carry the weight of filth? And who gets to decide the difference? Because long after the dead are buried, the label of unclean still lives. Chapter 4. The psychology of control. Here is where it becomes disturbing. Psychologists found that societies with intense cleanliness norms often experience higher anxiety around unpredictability. Dirt cannot be fully controlled. It reappears. It resists perfection. Death, strangely, offers closure. A beginning. An end. A narrative. Dirt has no ending. So nations obsessed with order turn cleanliness into a battlefield. Floors must shine. Bodies must conform. Spaces must be sterile. Not for health alone, but to silence the terror that chaos is always one step away. In such cultures, fear of dirt becomes fear of collapse. Collapse of identity. Collapse of discipline. Collapse of the story they tell themselves about who they are. Death threatens life. Dirt threatens self-image. And self-image, for nations, is sacred. Chapter 5. When cleanliness becomes cruel. This is where the cost reveals itself. When dirt becomes taboo, compassion often disappears. Those who cannot maintain cleanliness, the poor, the sick, the displaced, are not seen as victims. They are seen as failures. Entire societies quietly decide who is clean enough to belong. This is why some nations will invest billions into appearance, while ignoring silent suffering. Because suffering can be hidden, but dirt is visible, and visibility is unbearable. Ironically, death unites people. Funerals bring empathy. Loss creates community. Dirt divides. It isolates. It dehumanizes. It justifies exclusion. And so, fearing dirt more than death becomes a way to preserve hierarchy, even at the cost of humanity. Chapter 6. The shocking truth. Here is the truth most nations will never admit. The fear of dirt is not about survival. It is about denial. Dirt reminds us that all order is temporary, that all structures decay, that all bodies return to the earth. Death is a moment. Dirt is a process. And that process exposes what societies spend centuries trying to hide. That perfection is an illusion. The nations that fear dirt the most are often the ones terrified of confronting their own fragility. Because dirt whispers what death screams only once. You cannot control everything. And perhaps the most shocking revelation of all, the societies that learn to tolerate dirt, to accept imperfection, to humanize disorder, are often the ones that face death with the least fear. So the next time you see a nation obsessed with spotless streets and spotless lives, ask yourself, are they protecting health or running from a truth they cannot wash away? Every civilization tells itself a story about order, about virtue, about what must be feared and what must be ignored. But the most dangerous ideas are not the loud ones. They are the ones that feel normal, the habits we never question, the disgust we inherit, the lines we draw without remembering who taught us where to draw them. We scrub our hands. We sanitize our streets. We polish our histories. Yet beneath the surface, the real contamination is never dirt. It is certainty. Certainty that cleanliness equals goodness. Certainty that order equals virtue. Certainty that what we fear must be wrong. This channel does not give answers. It opens fractures. Because progress has never come from comfort, only from confronting the questions we were told not to ask. So the next time something repulses you, pause. Ask yourself, is this fear protecting life or protecting a story that no longer deserves to survive? This was not an explanation. It was a disturbance. If this story unsettled you, good. It means something inside you is awake. But stories like this don't survive on silence. They survive on participation. Every like tells the algorithm this discomfort matters. Every comment keeps the conversation alive. Not just here, but in minds that haven't found this channel yet. And every subscription is a quiet vote for depth in a world addicted to noise. There are stories we're not supposed to hear, patterns we're not supposed to notice, questions we're not supposed to ask. This channel exists to break that rule. So if you want more revelations that challenge comfort, more histories that were cleaned before you ever saw them, more truths hidden behind politeness and fear, welcome to Twisted Chapter, where the uncomfortable is examined and the obvious is never trusted. Stand with this channel. Like the video. Leave your thoughts below. Subscribe to Twisted Chapter. Because the algorithm doesn't reward truth. It rewards momentum. And momentum is built together.